one of our great sports icon in the person of Mr. Eddie Ford, who we also lost recently. Eddie, of course, was one of the most versatile athletes we had in this country. Mastered baseball, cricket, and I believe he's the only Bahamian who would have scored 100 points in a basketball game. And, oh yeah, Eddie Ford was great. When I went to Tuskegee, me along with the leader of the opposition, I'm sure, the Ford name was extremely powerful in Tuskegee. So we benefited from the Ford name in many ways while we attended Tuskegee University in Alabama. So may Eddie also be remembered and rest in peace and one day rise in glory. Madam Speaker, today was not expected. Never thought that we would return here today without another one of our colleagues. And as I look to the right, to the far right, same side of the room, like you said, one behind the other, my good friend from West Grand Bahama, Obi, who always encouraged and supported me, he's going on, and now Vaughn Miller, who was a personal friend and an advisor. Vaughn never traveled to Grand Bahama without advising me that he's going to be in the area. If he's on mission, he wanted to include me in whatever he did. And on his last visit to Grand Bahama to do work, there's a project that I am working on in central Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, I met a lot of roadblocks in terms of getting the project going. A lot of red tape. And I was disappointed Minister Miller was in support, but of course we have to take technical advice. But he gave me some advice afterwards, advice that I acted on, that I'm not open to speak to in Parliament. And I can say right now, his advice is bearing fruit. And my project will be completed to the benefit of an important part of the community in Grand Bahama. So again, Vaughn is gone, Obi's gone, Dr. Gay is gone. I want to admonish the rest of us. Sometimes that political line could divide us. But there are times when we must put down our war tools, forget about the political divide, and recognize that at the end of the day, we are all brothers. I want to advise my colleagues, take care, brothers and sisters, take care of yourselves. We have families to look out for also. We are here to serve the people, and I'm saying we're dedicated to that task. But at the end of the day, remember, you also have to take care of yourselves. You have to take care of your family. You have to pay attention to what's going on. You have to spend time with your loved ones. Because oftentimes we don't think about our own mortality, but it's real. We all one day will die. And only when we do for our constituents, they'll remember. Sometimes they don't remember it. But remember, your family is extremely important. And one of the things that Vaughn did, he was very, I guess, passionate about the wealth being common. And he's also passionate about golden isles, old golden isles. I remember Vaughn in a very good way, and I want us all to remember him, as he would have transitioned from time into eternity. But I also want to admonish us to take care of ourselves and to also spend time with our loved ones. May Vaughn and all of our dearly departed rest in peace, and one day, together we should all rise in glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Yamacraw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I had the privilege of knowing the Honourable Vaughn Miller both as family and as a colleague in public service. While he was a few years ahead, as I would have iterated in our memorial, I came to know Vaughn as my big cousin who was always on the radio. His life and his work was well known, and we look forward to the times that he would come back home. Many of us recognize this voice, and many of us recognize that this voice had a way of drawing us in. It was steady, inspiring, and always carried a message that made one reflect and pause. You didn't just hear Vaughn speak because he liked to speak, because Vaughn was often very quiet. You listened when he spoke because his words had meaning. Madam Speaker, when Vaughn entered politics, I had the opportunity to sit with him during that time, and as parliamentary secretary, while I served in my capacity at the time as a unionist. Our meetings were often extended conversations, and we spoke about our family, we spoke about politics, and the journey of service. There were a few moments in this honorable house that Vaughn showed exactly what made him different. His ability to connect on a human level, the passion he had for this country and his people, beyond titles, beyond the need for popularity. He stood on principles. He stood on principle when many of his colleagues could not. And Vaughn made some decisions at the time that are etched in the annals of history. Later, we worked together at the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, he as minister and I as his Minister of State. And a man of few words, but always spoke volumes. This was his style. He wasn't one for unnecessary speeches. I spoke about how he didn't need to be loud to make an impact. But when he saw the need, Vaughn can always change pace. Vaughn and I used to joke that at any time, the Green Castle could come out in him. And if you know the people from Green Castle, you know what I mean. His strength was his consistency, his calmness, and his ability to remain grounded in principle. But Vaughn was more than a public servant. He was also a pastor and a man of faith. Vaughn continued his church whilst serving in Parliament. As a Christian leader, he carried the responsibility of preaching and teaching the Word of God, and even holding online prayer sessions weekly. That role was not an easy one. It calls for discipline, it calls for prayer, it calls for sacrifice, and a dedication to moral values that uplift others. This was Vaughn. Vaughn's commitment to ministry reflected the importance of his faith as a guiding light in his life. Of course, he always had a way of making you laugh, or even burst out in laughter. Behind that firm stature, there was a man that could carry on a joke for hours. That was Vaughn. He knew when to laugh, when to be subtle, when to be steady, and he was always impactful. So as we remember him and his family for such a great loss, I see his uncle Tony Miller, former member of Parliament for Saudi Lutheran, is sitting in the gallery. An entire family, I would like to wish sincere condolences that this is a tremendous loss, but his memory will live on. Madam Speaker, yes, Vaughn is gone, but the dignity which he lived and the faith by which he stood and the example he left behind will remain for us. And I wish his entire family condolences, including his wife Cassandra, his son Vaughn Jr. May he rest in peace, and may the comfort of his legacy that he left behind and the guiding light be an inspiration to us all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Garden Hills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too stand in this honorable house to give tribute to two great men who have left us all behind. Before I start with the Honorable Vaughn P. Miller, today we pause to reflect on the life and legacy of unwavering services of the late Honorable Vaughn P. Miller a devoted member of Parliament, patriot, and man of deep eviction. Mr. Miller was more than just a politician. He was a man guided by principles, driven by purpose, and committed to the betterment of the Bahamas and the people he served. Whether speaking in the halls of Parliament or walking the streets of his constituency, his presence was marked by humility, strength, and a clear sense of duty. Throughout his career, Mr. Miller championed transparency, accountability, and faith-based values. His voice was one of clarity and concise, never afraid to stand for what he believed was right, even when it meant standing alone. He was respected not only for his political views, but for his sincerity and integrity with which he held them. Those who knew him personally will remember his kindness, his unwavering faith, and his quiet strength. He was a man of God and a man of the people, and a devoted family man. His loss is not only felt in Parliament, but in the hearts of all those whose lives he touched. As we mourn his passing, we also celebrate the legacy he leaves behind, a legacy of public service, moral courage, and deep love for country. May his soul rest in peace, and may his memory continue to inspire future leaders of this halls of Parliament. Madam Speaker, I also like to take this opportunity to speak on a man who have left a profound impact on medicine, politics, and sports in the Bahamas, one Dr. Norman Gay, one who have left his footprints in the stand and whom most of us and myself presently follow as Minister of Youth, Sports, and Culture. So I extend condolences to both gentlemen family, and may their soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Engliston.
Madam Speaker, I only have a few words. I don't have a prepared text, but I wanted the record to reflect just a few words on behalf of our brother, the Honorable Vaughn Miller. I had heard about him over the years in the background, the radio station, broadcasting personality, etc. I knew he was an Illustra boy, very proud of his roots. So I knew him as a personality in the background. But it was when I became to jointly serve in this Parliament on opposite sides of the divide that I really got to know him. And that was 2017 to 2021. And what I observed with him, even then I didn't really know him well, but I began to note tensions that he was experiencing as a member of the Free National Movement, in particular on two matters. One was the Commercial Enterprises Act, which was a piece of legislation which incentivized foreign labor and short-circuited the process, and was highly controversial, at least for us in this Parliament, and I believe in the wider country. But then I think during one of the debates when we were talking about the blacklisting, I referred to the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where the Western powers carved up ownership of the African continent to their own benefits. And afterwards, he came to me, and he was very activated by that. And we began to have a much deeper dialogue. But it was the issue of the VAT increase that really was where I think it drew the line for him, even though we saw tensions before that. And he voted no. He was promptly fired, and then he sat in the wilderness for a while, and as the Prime Minister indicated, he joined the Progressive Liberal Party. And at that point, he was a part of our parliamentary caucus. And that is when I really got to know him in a much deeper way. And as you've heard, he was someone who was very conscious about who he was, where he came from. His heroes were the likes of Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X. They influenced his thinking, and the way in which he saw the Bahamian people, and he truly believed that as legislators, as those who participate in the political process, we should empower, in particular, our black people because of the history from whence we had come. And he was very uncompromising on that. And so we had many discussions, what I particularly admired about him is because he, you know, if you're sitting in these halls and you have he was parliamentary secretary, he had a family, and he sacrificed or risked that to take a position of conscience. And this was such a strong signal to the country about politicians, about politics, about qualitative representation. And he became a part of our caucus, as I've indicated, and I think we found a common space ideologically, all of us in the Progressive Liberal Party. I believe he was at home when he joined us. And so he went into the battlefield on the other, again in Golden Isles, but on the other side, and was successful. And he invited me to speak to his branch on one occasion. I was privileged to do so. He and I always, along with others, would attend Dr. Anthony Farrington's services at Transformation Services International. I think Minister Bell, Member of Parliament Carmichael was there. And we went on just 2 Fridays ago, and Vaughn was not there, the late Vaughn Miller. And that was very unusual because every time I was there, he was there, and he was not there. And in less than 24 hours, he had left us. And so I think that what I will leave on the record for my part, my admiration for him is, and no one's perfect, my admiration for him was the fact that he was someone who was prepared to take a stand of conscience in this nation and to lose as a result of it. And he lost, but he was able to regroup and come back and have a voice in this parliament as a minister of government, one which we all remember and are able to refer to his many assertions in this parliament. His loss is very surreal to all of us. I asked the member for Grand Bahama there, Pine Ridge, how she's managing in that corner. It's not an easy thing where she is right now, next to that shrine in his honor. But we miss him. This is one of our members who's been lost. But we are bolstered by his being a part of our team and being part of the metal of who we are as a progressive Liberal Party force in this nation. And I want to say to his family, his wife and his son, he has a young son, our heartfelt condolences to him, to them, to his branch, who's deeply hurt by this loss, and to his constituency, the people of Golden Isles. They lost a giant, not just physically, but figuratively. And so we extend heartfelt condolences to him. We thank him for his service. We thank him for his example in this parliament. May his soul rest in peace.
Yes. Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Killarney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will have prepared condolence for Honourable Vaughn Miller, but I would make a few remarks also about Norman Gay, of which I have no prepared text for. But I was shocked, Madam Speaker, and saddened to hear of the sudden death of my parliamentary colleague, Vaughn Miller, at the age of 64. He was full of life and had so much to give to the Bahamian people, though through his life of service. The member for Golden Isles, Madam Speaker, served in the Davis Cabinet as the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources. He was a 2-term member of this House. Vaughn was originally a member of the Free National Movement for Golden Isles before joining the PLP. And Vaughan Miller was a man of faith and a patriot who believed in working on behalf of the Bahamian people. He had the courage to get involved in community life and public affairs. And he did not just sit on the sidelines and complain about what was wrong about the Bahamas. He was a doer and stepped forward to add his talents to the process to make life better for our people. He wanted more opportunity for the next generation of Bahamians. And Vaughan Miller hailed from the island of Eleuthera and was educated there and in New Providence before heading to the United States for tertiary studies. He attended the University of Richmond, CN College, and the Jacksonville Theological Seminary, earning bachelor's and master's degree. Education was most important to Vaughan. He had a distinguished career in broadcasting at the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas before entering frontline politics. He was also a trade unionist and social activist, always battling for workers' rights and for fair play. Vaughan was especially a man of deep faith. As an ordained pastor, he never tired of his most important work, which was leading souls to Christ. And during his time as Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources, Vaughan Miller championed the principle that Bahamian natural resources belong to all Bahamians. This is a belief that we all share on both sides of the aisle. His work was to ensure that policy emanated from his ministry reflecting his deeply held philosophical position. I was proud to bring Vaughan forward as a candidate in the 2017 general election. He was a hard-working and dedicated type that I wanted to be part of our parliamentary team. And during his time with the FNM, Vaughan made a valuable contribution to our administration. I thanked him for all that he did during that period. I was saddened when he left our party and joined the Progressive Liberal Party. However, I knew that in continuing with frontline politics, he would maintain his dedication to fighting for Bahamians and especially the downtrodden. His heart was with the people. He was a good man. His community of Golden Isles knew him and considered him an honest and fair-minded person who looked after the interests of all, regardless of party affiliation. We were fortunate to have served in this honorable house with Vaughan Miller. Though saddened by his death, Vaughan's family, friends, and constituents should be proud of what he accomplished in public life. The people of Golden Isles will fondly remember his representation and kindness over the years. On behalf of my wife, Patricia, and I should say Pat, I'm not used to Patricia, Pat and I express condolences to his wife, Cassandra, and son, Vaughan, on the death of a man of God who loved his country. May he rest in peace. And Madam Speaker, I'd also say a few brief words about Norman Gay. Norman Gay has served in this Parliament as Minister of Health under the PLP government. Norman's father and my mother are brothers and sisters. And as a youth, I could remember visiting the Princess Margaret Hospital, having been stuck by a nail at that particular time. And Norman was a physician at the time at Princess Margaret Hospital, walking around in his white shoes, white pants, white shirt, and white. He was extremely sharp. And that was when I discovered through family relations that we were cousins. Madam Speaker, I walked through that hospital like a peacock that day, knowing that I had a relative who was a doctor. And he made a great impression on me. And I subsequently, at that time, made a determination that I wanted to be like Norman, and subsequently became a doctor. And many others followed that same pathway of becoming physicians. But he was the first to become a physician within the family. Norman made great contribution to sports. He was an ardent sportsman, and he made extremely great contribution to health. He specialized in the art of delaying aging and delaying growth. Unfortunately, as determined as we may be, we cannot delay aging. We must eventually become old and subsequently pass on for others to replace us. He loved his constituents, the constituency of Baintown. And though we shared the same belief, that is, his belief was that of upliftment of the poor, opportunities for all, education for all, and providing proper housing facilities. We shared similar belief, but he ended up on that side, and I ended up on another side, though our beliefs were the same. Madam Speaker, I want to conclude by saying there are many. Norman has made great contribution to health, and he has guided many, not only in health, but also in the sports arena. May his soul rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I join with my colleagues today in paying tribute to a number of fallen soldiers, as we call them. And today, while our hearts are heavy, we are yet grateful. Grateful for the lives of, and of course, the legacies, as you hear from so many of the colleagues this morning, of two Bahamian men in particular, and even a third, whose service and character left lasting impacts on the nation. I speak firstly of our colleague, the late Honorable Vaughn Miller, also Dr. Norman Gay, and former trade unionist, Mr. Franklin Carter. Madam Speaker, though Minister Miller and Minister Gay served in different seasons of our country's story, both shared the same foundation, which was a profound love for the Bahamas and an unwavering commitment to people, as you hear so many of the colleagues speak about their service to people. When it comes to Minister Vaughn, of course, this one is particularly personal to me because he was not just a colleague, he was like a big brother. Minister, the member for Pine Ridge and I mentioning, you know, he always is like a big brother, always ensuring that especially the women were well. He represented Golden As, and of course I represent Golden Gates, and he would affectionately call me Gigi. And with that same warmth, he would pull me aside, He would offer words of encouragement. He would say, stay the course, you're doing well, keep going, stay focused, Gigi. He always had encouraging words, and that was just his spirit. He had also a rare gift of discernment. He could see the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. And I think that comes through his life as a sportsman as well. And he's what I call a fence mender. He's somebody who was a peacemaker, and he always sought harmony and understanding, especially amongst colleagues. Everyone knows that he was a very prayerful man, humble, very steadfast, and he believed deeply in purpose and in doing what was right and what was good, and it wasn't about the fanfare for him. Even when he faced challenges, his optimism and his faith shone through, and he believed in the power of unity. And of course, he believed in the promise and the origin of our people. So Minister Vaughan leaves behind not only a legacy of service, but a reminder that kindness, faith, and humility are the most powerful forces, and especially powerful forces for good in leadership. Madam Speaker, while obviously I didn't serve alongside Dr. Norman Gay, I recall as a little girl growing up in Baintown, he was our doctor. Like the member for Kalani said, it was a fascination about certain professions, and being a doctor was one of them. I remember personally seeing him and hearing about him, of course, in the community. And I always remember him to be a man who carried himself with distinction, and whose presence was definitely felt across the Baintown community. So he wasn't just Dr. Gay, he was our doctor, and he was a figure of compassion, he was a figure of wisdom, and though he was small in stature, he was a figure of strength for our community, who was respected by everyone that he encountered. I remember also as a child watching how people spoke about him with admiration, especially our mothers and our grandmothers, and how his work and his mannerism left us as young people with an impression that was indelible. Those early impressions, Madam Speaker, taught me that leadership wasn't about prestige, very down to earth, always connecting with us. As he came through Laird Street, I remember vividly stopping on our porch, talking to the neighbors, and it was always a spirit of service, showing up for our people. And of course, he used his gifts to uplift his people, his constituents, and of course, his nation. He was a physician, he was a parliamentarian, he was a sportsman, he was a statesman, and he lived this life defined by integrity and discipline and lots of national pride. So his influence reached beyond medicine and it reached beyond politics. It shaped a generation of Bahamians who saw in him what public service could be like at its best. So today, as we remember Reverend Vaughan Miller, our colleague, and Dr. Norman Gay, I also pay tribute to former trade unionist Frank Carter. He was the former AAAWU president and a labor consultant of the government, someone who I knew personally through his wife, Marion, and somebody who always had an upright and forthright spirit, and also had a spirit of fighting for the people. So as we honor all of their lives, in different ways, they've helped to build our nation. Their lives all remind us that service to the Bahamas isn't measured in years or titles held, but in lives touched, in hearts touched, in the examples they would have set. So, Madam Speaker, I stand this morning to honor those three great men. I hope that we can carry forward their life in service, with faith, with humility, and with a deep love for our people as they all embody it. May their families take comfort in knowing that their loved ones served well, inspired many, and we pray that they will never be forgotten for their life, for their legacy, and for their work. May their souls rest in God's eternal peace and rise in glory. Amen.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I did not want this opportunity to pass without lending my voice to pay tribute to, first of all, to Dr. Norman Gay, who I did not know very well, but I want to associate myself and to adopt all of the wonderful things that have been said about Dr. Gay. But I also wanted to just very shortly give a word of tribute to Vaughn Miller. Today we remember him. We remember him as a man of principle. We remember him as a voice of conscience. And we remember him as the colleague who would end his speeches with making the wealth more common. Madam Speaker, I witnessed him fight for policies that widened opportunity. He focused on that and zeroed in on that point, that lowered the walls between those who were privileged and the everyday people. He was very focused on, zeroed in on making sure that we broke those walls and those barriers. And he reminded us that a nation's greatness is measured by how broadly its blessings are shared. Yes. That we should make sure that whatever we do, we focus on making sure that everybody eats, everybody is able to share in our blessings. Madam Speaker, he was one of a few who was able to bridge divides in what has become a two-party system that can harden into habit. Vaughn Miller navigated differences with grace and with purpose. Whether he was an F&M or whether he was a PLP, he navigated that with grace. And that can be evidenced by the fact of what has been said by folks on both sides. This is how he moved our politics forward, and I respect him for that. In a quiet way, in a persistent way, but with results. Madam Speaker, one moment, or many moments that stand out to me, and I believe stand out to many in this place, before every sitting, Vaughn would walk the floor and shake members' hands, every member, as I recall it. And he would simply ask, "How you doing?" In a chamber that often trades blows and focuses on differences and counterpoints, I believe he was different. That practice of going around the table, it was ordinary, but yet it was so profound. It reminded us that respect is not weakness, it is strength. That we do our best work when we see human beings before we see political colors. We honor him today. Let us remember him by widening opportunity, by speaking to each other with civility, and by committing ourselves to the ideal and recommitting ourselves to the ideal of making the wealth more common. And so on behalf of the people of East Grand Bahama, my family, I offer sincere condolences to his family. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pinewood.
Speaker, I too wish to join the chorus of colleagues paying tribute to the late Vaughn Miller, Dr. Norman Gay, and also to the trade unionists Frank Carter, who I knew personally. As it relates to Vaughn Miller, we all heard of his passion, in particular for the downtrodden in our society, the most vulnerable. I knew him on a personal level, whether it be ZNS and other entities. I remember when he got the F&M nomination, he came to my house, actually, and we were discussing his Southern change. And we joked about it, we laughed about it, and then I continue as chairman of public disclosure, where we would discuss disclosure matters. And his was one of conviction, but he did not take things personally. He could agree to disagree, and that's what I like most about him. But in this time of politics, it is not common to find an individual not only to go against the status quo, but to be prepared to suffer the consequences that came with that decision that he took. And Vaughn Miller was one of those individuals who, if convicted on a certain position, he was prepared to take the consequences that came along with it. Yes. And it is my view that history will be very kind to Vaughn for his service and his convictions and his willingness to take whatever came along with that. And I think his family should be proud. I see his Uncle Tony in here, who probably would have had Vaughn for at least a couple of times in the traditionally PLP family when you ran and won in 92 and in 97. And so it shows that he was prepared, if he had a certain belief, to go against traditions. As it relates to Dr. Norman Gay, my father spent 50 years in the public health system, and I knew of Dr. Gay. I met him on several occasions. My father started out as a male nurse, ended up as hospital administrator. But he would always speak of Dr. Gay of being a principled person. And back then, having a light-skinned individual taking those kind of positions, not that it was peculiar to just him, but to see somebody who was so accomplished, representing a constituency of people who did not reflect his personal position, and yet to be so understanding of their plight and willing to help. That is something that was profound. And, you know, growing up in Centerville Seventh-day Adventist Church, he had family members, Miss Amy Gay and Roy Gay, who were members of that. I see the clerk is smiling, for he know of which I speak. And he would frequent the mother church in those days, and he was always somebody who was affable and somebody who was easy to approach. And he played a tremendous role in the building of this country, not only in his professional duty, but also as a politician. And lastly, Madam Speaker, Mr. Frank Carter. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister had spoken to me. Frank was at a function that we were at, and he had given me certain instructions, of which I said to him at the time, I said, PM, Frankie, have to come to you. He can come to me. He know me personally from our days at, on Mackey Street. There was a spot where he, the late Bradley Roberts, and others, we would meet for boiled fish on the weekends. And it was then, a few weeks ago at that session with the Prime Minister and myself, that I learned that Frank was actually, I think, on dialysis. And because I just